is the holiday season, and for the Lakes Brass Quintet, that means it's time to play Mr. Hanky and Fairy Tale of New York. But for most trumpet players, it means two things: Handel and Tchaikovsky. So buckle up, buckaroos, because today we're going to go through some of the most important trumpet orchestral excerpts of the holiday season. And you better stick around to the end of the video, because I'm going to show you the most important trumpet excerpt that's ever been written. It is a tradition for many choirs across this great country to perform parts of Handel's Messiah at this most festive time of the year. And I say parts because professional groups might play the entirety of the Messiah, but community choirs might choose an aria or probably the Hallelujah Chorus. So trumpet players, you better learn the part to the Hallelujah Chorus. Now, I'm not going to go through the entirety of the Hallelujah Chorus, but we are going to look at the most important descending 5-note D major scale of your life. Don't miss it like I did one year at Easter. Okay, here's the thing. It was a crazy weekend. I played a vigil the night before, then I had an 8:30 service and an 11 o'clock service. And we're in Nashville. You never know who's going to walk into the church. And sure enough, one of the biggest names in Christian contemporary music walks in to the 8:30 service, and I'm starting to sweat bullets, and I get to the part where it's supposed to be ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, but I forgot how to count whole notes, and I just totally didn't even play it, totally missed it. So the moral of the story is count. Count, 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 count! The way Handel constructs the Hallelujah Chorus is undeniably genius. But there are places in these phrases where something feels like it starts on beat 1, but you're actually on beat 3. So really keep track of these long-held notes. Even recording these excerpts during my lunch break, I found myself being like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1. Did I say 1 already? 2, 3. Uh-oh. Here is the most important descending 5-note D concert major. Jesus Christ. Here is the most important D major 5-note descending scale that you will ever play in your life. Our next trumpet orchestral excerpt for the holiday season comes from what can only be described as perhaps the most important piece of music and visual media ever produced. Barbie and the Nutcracker. I actually don't know if this one's in Barbie and the Nutcracker, but I was the little brother who had to watch Barbie and the Nutcracker, so someone get my reference. I am, of course, talking about the Spanish chocolate dance from the Nutcracker, which features a very prominent trumpet solo. There are a few things that make this excerpt tricky to play. One, it's not very loud, yet the excerpt goes all the way up to a high C. So if we try to approach that high C like it's a John Williams style high C, we might over squeeze our abs, which will cut off our throat. We might hit the B flat underneath. We might not get to the right partial. So instead, think about it being lighter. Think about stretching up to the high C. Really focusing on that tongue coming up, arching into your E vowel to help speed up that air. The next excerpt that I want to look at that you trumpet players might play around the holiday season comes from yet another Tchaikovsky ballet, this being Swan Lake. The solo I want to look at in particular comes from the Danse Napolitaine, and you'll notice it's written for cornet in A. Be very, very careful if you're playing the cornet part to know whether you're on a B flat or A cornet. It changes throughout the piece. Now, believe it or not, I was going to play this excerpt on my A cornet, but when I sat down to record, I discovered that I really need to change a spring in the first valve. It wasn't quite coming up all the way, no matter how much I cleaned and oiled it. So I wound up having to play it on my B-flat cornet and transpose. Now, you could either think about this transposition as everything being down a half step, or instead of reading in the key of F, you can use your knowledge of solfege, if you've developed your knowledge of solfege, to play in the key of E. Now, if you have an A cornet, which you might be able to find at your local pawn shop, this excerpt sits very similarly to any kind of turn-of-the-century cornet solo repertoire. Think Carnival of Venice or Bellstedt's Napoli. Maybe not that technical. The only spot that's kind of tricky is the piamoso in the middle of the excerpt, only because depending on your director, that tempo might fall in the gray zone of should I single tongue or should I double tongue. So spend some time practicing it maybe both ways, single and double tongue. That way, no matter what tempo you're playing at, you can play it comfortably. Here's how this excerpt sounds. And that's it! That's all of the important trumpet orchestral excerpts for the holiday season. Okay, fine, we'll talk about Sleigh Ride. In case you live under a rock and have never seen this part before, in the first trumpet part of Leroy Anderson's Sleigh Ride, there is a solo at the end of the piece where you have to use a half-valve technique in order to imitate a horse's whinny. Of course, the big challenge of the horse whinny is how the heck do I half valve and somehow manage to play over the band or the orchestra and be heard. So if you do the traditional half valve all three valves, you get something that sounds like this. Because all three valves are down halfway, what you're doing is you're adding extra resistance to your trumpet that usually isn't there, because when our valves are down all the way, the air flows into each of the slides. Simple acoustical physics. So if you like the sound of all three valves down halfway, might I suggest really focusing on blowing a lot of extra air into your instrument. Hi, hello, I'm back. This is Freddy from 2 days later. I didn't realize until sitting down to edit this video that my mic cord was doggy doo-doo. If up until this point you heard any kind of, I'm talking, something like that, yeah, that's why. And it totally ruined my description of why the third valve, half valve technique is superior for the Sleigh Ride solo, so I'm going to take you through that right now real quick, as I think it is very important information to know. Alright, so on our trumpet, our tuning slide feeds all the way down and around into what valve? The third valve. So if I want to get a clean sounding squeeze, all I really need to do is hold down this third valve halfway. This creates less resistance than if I were to hold all three valves down halfway. When I try to squeeze with all three valves, I find that it's hard to get anywhere kind of above that G partial. But when I just squeeze down my third valve, I find it's easier for me to get up to G, B flat, maybe high C and D, but really I think that whinny sounds best if you keep it right around that G, B flat partial towards the top of the staff. So to set myself up to play the whinny, what I'm going to do is place my left pointer finger on the valve stem, and then use that as sort of a block to keep my third valve in that half valve position. This should give me all the resistance I need in order to create a convincing squeeze and then shake as I come down through that whinny. And without further ado, here is the perfect sleigh ride horse whinny.